Welcome to the Fast Break Podcast. I'm Ari Betterly here with Ryan Costello and Sam Elster for the Hoosier Network. As always, we have a lot to talk about, but let's just dive right in. So, we're filming this podcast on a Monday today, following the game yesterday on Sunday. So, let's talk about it. Who wants to start?
I can go first. I think Indiana, I think we all agree upon this, and it was kind of the general consensus with all the media people I talked to that it was probably their most complete game on both sides of the ball. Their bench showed up big. They scored the most points they've scored all season. They just looked locked in and ready for the matchup. And even though this was a decent Bellarmine team coming in.
Yeah, I think going into this, we were really talking about their game against Purdue. Even though they ended up losing, they had a big lead until Purdue kind of crawled their way back. But I think that we were all kind of expecting it to be a little bit of a closer game. But,
Yeah.
Indiana proved us completely wrong in a good way. Complete game. The defense was there. The offense was there. The bench was there. Everyone that needed to step up, stepped up.
Yeah. And just building off that, I think this is definitely the most cohesive we've seen this team play thus far throughout the season. You could argue one of the more recent games, but as a whole, you just can't deny the 45 bench points. And even Chloe Moore McNeil recorded her 400th career assist in this game. There's just so many milestones, but I would like to shout out Henna Sandvik. I did my package a little bit about her and just how she stepped up for the Hoosiers in this game, along with some other bench players as well, but having her career high of 13 points and just getting those minutes when those injuries have been, bringing the Hoosiers down. Her and Jules Lamandola, I think, have been very aggressive in the defensive end, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And 27 assists on 37 made shots to only 11 turnovers. That will win you if you are able to get around that mark and around that margin, like a lot of wins in the Big Ten. So if they can continue to play like that, you won't get that every night, but have something around that, I think they'll be in a good place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even going back to Chloe Moore McNeil, when I was looking at the stats yesterday, she only had 2 points, but I don't even think that even matters.
You would never notice.
You would have never noticed on the court or in the final score because, her impact on the court is just so huge. And, obviously getting her 400th career assist, I feel like that really, defines her gameplay and her impact in Indiana basketball.
I was going to say, if it's not a scoring stat, there's always other statistics that stick out for Chloe Moore McNeil that shine through in every game. But, I feel like there's no one player that shined. I think it was everybody in a collective effort. And then I'm just going to show a little quote that Terry Morin said to wrap us up here. But she said, anytime you have adversity the way we've had it this season, other people have to step up. And I think this was just a testament to that every person on the bench or off it, being a starting lineup, on the starting lineup, they just really shined and then worked cohesively.
One more nugget I want to say, because it was the first time in program history, they had 7 people in double-digit figures in scoring, which is impressive. And when Chloe Moore McNeil only scores 2, you need other people to step up. And like you said, she just did it in so many other ways with all of her assists. So that was impressive. Like you said, it was a total team effort. And I think that's what Terry Morin wants from her team. Yeah. Not one person to be like, I'm the star and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I don't think that's Indiana basketball. Unless you have Mackenzie Holmes, you might have a little bit of that, but that's just from her talent, not her being that way.
Yeah.
But moving forward, we are wrapping up the non-conference part of the season, and they're going to play Oakland the 22nd. So let's just talk briefly about, what does this game look like for IU? Obviously, it's not a Big Ten matchup, but what does this mean walking into, Big Ten gameplay that's going to be shortly following this game?
Yeah, I think that Indiana really needs to come out strong with this. Obviously, rounding out the non-conference schedule before a very daunted, is the word that Terry Morin used, Big Ten conference.
Yeah.
So I think that they really need to end this off with a win to, build up the confidence before these tough teams come to Assembly Hall and they, travel around.
Yeah, I think they need to take advantage like the other two, because Oakland's played 2 other Big Ten teams, Michigan and Michigan State, and they've both beaten them by quite a wide Michigan State's. Both Big Ten teams have beaten Oakland by quite a wide margin. So I think they need to do something similar because, like Sam said, going into conference play, starting with the number 1 team in the country, you need to have your best foot forward. So you need to have another good showing in non-conference. So you can have that confidence going into that very daunted conference schedule.
Yeah. And I think you made a good point, Ryan, about, just having this be a placemaker game. where do you stand alongside the Michigan and the Michigan States and how they played against this team? I think will, kind of come together to see what they look like in this Big Ten season. But, Terry Moore, and I say this every episode, she said it's not going to be a straight road. But I think if they have the consistency they've been having from the players off the bench, and then obviously the contributions by Yarden Gonzone and Claymore McNeil, that it should be a pretty similar match as like this past game was, in my opinion.
I think it helps that they have another week off in between both games, so they
Right.
can really focus in on the opponent while also getting some rest and really focusing in practice.
Yeah, I just think it's like so like noteworthy, like the progression of this team compared to that first game against Brown, and then of course the loss against Harvard. I mean, now looking at the Harvard loss, it's not as bad. We were looking at the net rankings, like IU's currently ranks number 41, and Harvard is number 34. So they're still having a pretty decent season.
Right.
So I mean, I think looking back at that, I think it's so noteworthy how much this team has already progressed, and it's only December, and conference play hasn't even gone to full swing yet. So I think that's a really big nugget to take out.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the improvement is something to just focus on because when you walk into that, Big Ten gameplay that's going to be daunting, you have to look at the positives and say, okay, this team started here, playing tough games against Harvard and that Butler matchup that you didn't expect. And even that Southern Indiana was really touch and go. But then you have these matchups, against the Penn States. Then obviously games like, hopefully Oakland, where you can just make this a stepping stone to where you need to be for games like UCLA and USC eventually. So
And more to your point, like Caroline Striplin and Henna Sandvik said in their press conference, it's all about like the growth that they've had since the beginning of the season. And when you look at their losses, like Sam said, they don't have. It's like I think top or like under 100 is where it's like really like not a good loss. Like it looks bad on your resume, but they don't have any of those. Butler's number 75, like Sam said, Harvard's 34, and then North Carolina's 23. So with so many opportunities ahead of them, with 10 teams ranked in the top 37 of the net, there's so many opportunities. So you can't look behind. You just have to look to the future and play the best that you can.
And I have another question for you guys. Do you think that Indiana could start to inch their way back into the rankings, higher up because they're inching their way now?
I think they could. I mean, they have two big wins under their belt that, not many people talk about. They won against Baylor and they won against Stanford. Baylor on a neutral court, and I think that was a really big win, especially with Sydney Parrish falling down. I think that if they get some of the wins over the ranked opponents in the Big Ten, that maybe come like late January, February, maybe we can see them in like the 20s in the AP poll. I think that's possible.
I think definitely with an upset of either California school, that they would definitely probably get back in if they don't lose their other games, because that's an impressive win. And not many, only out of the two teams, only one team's beat USC, which was Notre Dame. So and they're very, very good opponents. So
I agree. I think those crucial home games are going to be very impactful for Indiana. And you're going to have to get at least, 2 out of the 4 wins of, UCLA, USC, Ohio State, and then you have Maryland. I think you got to win some of those games to try to inch your way back in, as well as, the Michigan States and the Michigans.
And that kind of leads us right into our hot topic. You
Yes.
did a nice little segue there,
Thank
Ari.
you. I appreciate it.
The first question I think we should do is talking about the 2 top teams in the Big Ten, since we're kind of already talking about Big Ten play. So, Sam, who would you say your 2 top Big Ten teams are?
Obviously, you guys will probably touch on USC, but I'm going to talk about UCLA and Maryland. UCLA, of course, number 1, but I think it's also kind of noteworthy that their schedule hasn't been too I don't want to use the word difficult, but too like scary looking
For this team.
For this team, but they do have a pretty big win over South Carolina, obviously. But I mean, they're led by Lauren Betts, who's just been absolutely dominant, averaging a double-double. So obviously that's going to be talked about. But I think that we're really going to see out of UCLA once Big Ten conference play starts, how they, will live up to the hype. But Maryland is honestly number 7 in the country, kind of slept on. And they're led by Kayleen Sminkle and Shaylee Sellers, who are really holding them together. And they've had a pretty tough schedule. Some teams going against in the ranked AP poll. But I think they'll be a little bit of a sleeper team in the Big Ten, not really talked about much.
They started to, before I give you my answer, they started to heat up towards the end of last year.
Yeah.
They upset Ohio State. They were the number 8 team in the Big Ten tournament, and Ohio State was the number 1. And they had like a little run there in March. And then now they got a good transfer, and Kayleen Schmickel, she played at Rutgers. She was super talented there. So those two guards are going to be really hard to beat when it comes to conference play.
Totally.
Yeah, I would agree. Ryan, what do you think? You said you wanted to segue in.
Yeah, so you touched on UCLA. That's one of my schools, but also USC. They've looked like they can play against anybody. The only game they really looked like a little bit shaky on was their only loss of the season, which is to number 3 Notre Dame.
Right.
But when you have Hannah Hidalgo and the other talented players on Notre Dame's roster, that's not a bad loss. And Notre Dame is one of the national championship contenders. So I think USC and UCLA will be in a very good place throughout this entire Big Ten conference play.
And I would agree with you, Ryan. I think I could say a similar prediction, but I'm going to change it up because, yes, I agree. I think USC and UCLA will be top teams this entire Big Ten season. But I also think you can't count out someone who's tied for the number 1 spot right now, Ohio State. I brought them up in previous podcasts, but I think they really are just a playmaker team. That aggressive defense, they are, again, tied for number 1 in the Big Ten. And they have players who are like Chance Gray averaging very well percentage-wise with points. And then same with Petty shooting 60% overall from the field goal. So I think that, when you have key players like that who are consistent on these Big Ten teams, you can't knock them out from being in the top. I mean, again, this team has been very strong the past couple of years, and I could see that continuing to happen this season as well.
When I think about Ohio State, I think about Indiana and the pressure.
Every time, yes.
Indiana they played well against the pressure last game and against Penn State, but I just get like flashbacks to when they played Ohio State, and there's just a way that those guards press Indiana that just like messes with their psyche or something, they do it to a lot of other
They do
opponents.
it to all the Big Ten teams.
I don't know, the way that they just do it, I feel like is always so aggressive, and they speed up the game. So
they
that's
have a
why
very
they're
good
so
pace,
successful.
Yeah. And I feel like we've seen Indiana go up against a lot of different presses this year. I mean, they even saw it yesterday out of Bellarmine, but I think that they've gotten a little bit more comfortable with it. But Ohio State's just a gritty team, and I think that that'll get to Indiana when the time comes.
Yeah.
So that kind of segues us into our other topic, which is what do you guys think IU needs to do to improve going into Big Ten play? I feel like they've shown improvement in the press, but that's something they can always improve upon. But Sam, what would you say?
Yeah, I think that we talked about it a lot in the beginning of the season, but the turnovers, they still had some yesterday, and they've been having some, but no more careless, unforced turnovers. It's going to lead to a lot of easy buckets for these strong Big Ten teams, and those are just buckets that Indiana cannot let up. Also, like Terry Morin talked about it a lot, coming out hot out of the gate, I think that'll be very, very big. I think that coming out of the gate hot, putting up like a 10-0 run is a huge thing for Indiana, and I think it really builds up the confidence. But also the front court. Carolina showed that she can bring in that veteran experience and that she can really thrive in like high-stake environments. But I don't mean to call out Lily Meister. I think she's great, but I think that she does need to shake off the cobwebs a little bit and really try and feel more comfortable in her new starting role. And obviously, this is her first season really getting these type of minutes, but I think that she needs to really reduce the fouls, the turnovers, and just play her style of basketball, which she is capable of playing.
Sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine.
That leads me into what I think they need to improve upon. I think Caroline Strickland showed us that she can produce in the front court the last 2 games with 27 points against Penn State, 18 against Bellarmine. But I think Lily Meister, her counterpart, really needs to step it up. Also with her, and they need to both be consistent because earlier in the season they really didn't have much consistency in the front court. So I think when you're playing against bigs like Lauren Betts or Kiki Iriafen, you really need protection from your bigs.
Right. Especially your starting big. I mean, like Lily's a junior now. She was, basically like under the wing of Mackenzie Holmes for her entire past 2, now 3 years at Indiana. I think that, she can really use that to her advantage.
And you guys kind of took the words right out of my mouth. It was going to be consistency in scoring. I was saying the same exact thing that, to be a reliable player is going to be very important in those high pressure situations coming up in the Big Ten. And they're going to need Lily. Like, again, yes, they're going to need her to be strong and not get in those turnovers. I mean, and even when she came off of the bench yesterday, she looked disappointed in herself and not happy with her performance. So even if she can get that confidence to be happy with her performance, that could be a great step in the right direction for Indiana, as well as, having Strickland be that game changer that she's been these past couple games and being consistent off the bench. Same with Shea. I mean, she had that amazing game at the tournament, but then she's been kind of, all over the place on the floor, still that vocal point on the floor as well, but just scoring wise has been a little touch and go. I just think it's going to be important for her to be consistent as well when you have, sharpshooters on all these Big Ten teams as well. And then last but not least, you have your starting lineup, Yarden and Chloe Moore McNeil, who are fairly consistent, I would say. But like we mentioned, although Chloe was consistent in assists and other facets of the game, her score percentage and scoring as a whole wasn't there. So I think all these players and the bench players that we saw yesterday come together to have the 7 players in double digits. That needs to happen every game. And then when Sydney Parrish comes back, I think that will also be someone to look out for as well, hopefully.
I think you made a really good point with Shea. It's been kind of like confusing because she came in as this very high pedigree 3-point shooter, and we just haven't seen that translate. I think it's just maybe her getting used to the environment at Indiana and working in that system, but it's just been like a little bit like head scratching since she did shoot the ball so well her 2 years at Penn State.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yesterday she went 0 for 4 from behind the arc, and I think that was frustrating for her. And I think that, time will come for when she, can really find her groove in game. I mean, we saw it against Baylor, but I think that she does need to find that consistency.
And it's definitely possible because, I mean, when you have players like Hannah who just said, Lily inspired me. She's been doing a lot better this season. I wanted to do that for myself. I've been in the gym working. I could definitely see Shea being the dog that we mentioned and, keep working to get those points and to get her shot more consistent because I think she has the capability. I mean, we've seen her shoot the lights out. So it's just a matter if she does it in time.
That's why it's important to remember that basketball is a team sport and you don't have to put so much pressure on yourself because like we saw yesterday, there were so many good things to take away from the game and so many good individual performances. So I think it's just embracing your teammates and knowing that the season is a long 29, 30 games plus into March. So you can't think about it too much.
Yeah. True. And like I said, there's so much time left in this season, and there's already been so much improvement. So I'm honestly excited to see where this season goes, and I have a lot of hope for this team. Just the way that Terry Morin spoke about, her players and how they've been, working to become better. So it could be interesting for sure.
And then to close it out, the last question I have for you guys, there were so many good individual performances and individual stats from yesterday. What's one that you think that they need to carry the next non-conference game and then into Big Ten play and beyond?
Yeah, I think that they did a great job with producing buckets in the paint. I think that they did a really good job playing the inside-out game, obviously against what was kind of like a man defense and then zone defense. But I think that the guards with Claymore McNeil and Shea Chesky did a great job driving in and then kicking it out to find, the perimeter shooting. I mean, they had 30 points off of threes, which was pretty great, and then 46 points in the paint was pretty impressive too. So I think that they need to continue just playing their style of basketball, reading the defense very well, and, their playmakers making those plays into easy buckets.
Yeah.
I think bench points, they had 45 bench points yesterday, a season high.
That's the thing of this podcast. 45 bench points. How many times have we said it?
It's crazy. I think a lot. It was so impressive because I feel like the last couple years, the starters for Indiana have been so reliable and have scored so many points consistently that the bench hasn't had as much time to shine. But I think this season with the adversity they faced and injuries to Sydney Parrish, Lene Beaumont, I think that has really made other people step up. And I think in the long run that will help them be a better team because when you have a Sydney Parrish come back who will probably get her starting lineup spot back, you have 3 good players off the bench in Caroline Strickland, Hannah Sandvik, and Jules Lamandola that have all been getting great experience. Terry Morin kind of mentioned it in her press conference, and I think that will come to help them not only in Big Ten play but into March.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you said, those minutes are crucial because Tara Moyne said any minutes they get off the bench are great minutes, for IU basketball.
Right.
But the fact that they're playing crucial, high pressure moments this early on in the season and getting that veteran experience, that's going to level up all of these players. So then if someone else does go out with injury, knock on wood, that doesn't happen, they will be ready to step up. And so I think that it could in the long run be a good thing for this team because now they're building that depth even more. But what I was going to say is the depth. Yep, Hannah Sandvik, just doing really well in the assists as well, the chemistry. We've mentioned this over and over again. I think the defense, they have forced 19 turnovers, holding Bellarmine just to 36% shooting, and they sealed this with a collective effort. It wasn't that one player, it was all of them. And I think wrapping this podcast up, that's going to be super important. I think this team needs to do that. And if they don't, I'd be shocked if they don't because they have the potential and they showed it. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, guys, as I said, I was wrapping it up, but we do wish you a very happy holidays. We are all going on break,
Yes.
so we won't be able to be here together, but that's okay because we all will be watching women's basketball and covering the games over break. So make sure to follow us all on X and, throughout the Hoosier Network Instagram. I'm Ari Betterly here with Ryan Costello and lovely Sam Elster. And we hope you enjoyed the Fast Break podcast.
And have a happy new
Happy-
year.
Oh yes. Happy
In
New
2025, we'll see you there
Year.
and we'll talk about more basketball. We'll have a lot to catch up on in the next podcast.
Yes.
Whole lot to catch up
Yeah.
on.
Yay.